I'm Claire Donovan, and I live in Maplewood Terrace, a suburban neighborhood where every street is lined with neat hedges and the air carries a whisper of calm. It's the kind of place that promises harmony but breeds discord, and that discords. Name is Karen Whitlock, the HOA president who wields her clipboard like a torch. This story is about her, me, and my daughter, Ellie's Braille book she burned in public, thinking she could blind her world. She didn't know I'm a State Librarian Investigator, and I was about to turn the pages on her reign. Ellie's 13, the gentle smile and chestnut hair that falls over her shoulders, even when her blindness makes navigating life a challenge. She's been blind since birth, relying on Braille to read her fingers tracing stories of adventure, her voice whispering the words she feels. 2 years ago, after my husband's illness left me a single mom, I moved us to Maplewood Terrace. For stability, I'm a slender woman, soft-spoken but resolute. Used to investigating library violations and protecting access to information in my job. But here, I'm just Ellie's mom. I don't advertise my role as a State Librarian Investigator, enforcing laws to safeguard educational resources. All I wanted was a quiet haven for Ellie. And her Braille books gave us that. The Braille books were Ellie's universe, stacked. On a shelf in our living room, tactile pages of Harry Potter, Charlotte's Web, and her favorite, The Secret Garden. She'd sit by the window, her fingers dancing across the raised dots, her face lighting up as she narrated to herself, her voice a soft melody. I'd watch from the kitchen, my heart swelling as she explored worlds through touch. Neighbors loved hearing her read. Mrs. Kim, the teacher next door, would listen, saying Ellie's stories are our treasure. Kids like Mia from across the street would ask her to read aloud, and Ellie would smile, her confidence growing. The books were her eyes, her connection to us. Everyone saw that except Karen. Karen Whitlock had been after us since we moved. Maybe it was the Braille book's cluttered look on the porch, which she called unsightly in her first venomous letter. Maybe it was Ellie's occasional narrations, too loud for her perfect Maplewood Terrace. She'd march over, her short gray hair stiff, her deep neckline blouses flashing, her curvy, bulky frame casting a shadow as she barked about property standards or noise issues. Her eyes, cold and disdainful, lingered on Ellie's Braille reader like it was a flaw. I'd nod, move the books inside, pay her fines, and keep the peace. Ellie had enough battle school isolation, the loss of her dad, the quiet of her dark world. I thought I could handle Karen's spite. I was wrong. It was a crisp March afternoon when the horror unfolded. Ellie was on the porch, her fingers tracing the secret garden, her chestnut hair catching the breeze. I was inside, sipping coffee, reviewing library audit reports, glancing at her with a smile. Her stack of Braille books sat beside her, a testament to her progress. Then Karen stormed into our yard, her face twisted with fury, her clipboard clutched like a weapon. "Those books are a blight," she shouted, pointing at the stack. "They're cluttering your porch." I stepped out, keeping my voice firm. "They're Ellie's Braille books, Karen. She's blind. They're educational on my property, and they stay." She scoffed, her eyes flicking to Ellie, who'd frozen, her hands still. "Blind or not, it's ugly. I'll get rid of them. If you don't." She scribbled on her clipboard and left, her heels clicking like a threat. Ellie's hands dropped, her face turning toward me, confusion in her silence. I knelt beside her, signing on her hand. "They're safe, sweetie." But her trust wavered, and a knot tightened in my chest. Karen wasn't bluffing. I spent the next day securing the books, moving them inside, locking the porch door. I photographed the stack, neat and legal, to counter Karen's clutter claim. I even drafted a polite email to Karen, attaching Ellie's teacher's letter about the book's necessity, hoping to appeal to reason. But Karen didn't understand reason, she understood power. That Friday, I was at work investigating a library fund misuse case, and Ellie was at her Braille class. Karen struck. Mrs. Kim called me, her voice panicked. "Claire, get home. Now, Karen's burning Ellie's books in the street. She's got a fire pit going." I floored my car, heart pounding, tires screeching on the pavement. When I pulled into Maplewood Terrace, the sight devastated me. A small fire pit blazed in the street, Ellie's Braille books, Harry Potter. Charlotte's Web, The Secret Garden crackling in flames, their pages curling into ash. Karen stood there, arms crossed, her smirk sharp as a blade, a lighter in hand. Neighbors watched, some filming, others gasping, their faces a mix of horror and guilt. "What the hell have you done?" I screamed, leaping from my car, my voice shaking the air. Karen's smirk widened, her voice dripping with fake authority. "I warned you, Claire. Those books were a violation. The HOA approved their removal. You burned my daughter's Braille books." I shouted, rushing to the fire, my hands reaching for the flames. "She's blind, Karen." Those were her world. She rolled her eyes, unmoved. "Don't play the pity card. Rules are rules." She turned, clutching her clipboard, and walked off, leaving the fire to devour the last pages. I wanted to chase her, to make her feel Ellie's darkness, but Mrs. Kim grabbed my arm, her eyes wet. "Ellie's coming home soon, Claire." Stared at the ashes, my chest tight, the smoke stinging my eyes. How was I going to tell her? I kicked dirt over the fire, salvaging what I could, charred fragments. A melted duck from Charlotte's Web, but it was gone, lost to Karen's hate. Mrs. Kim stayed, wringing her hands, muttering, "That woman's evil." Neighbors like Mr. Patel, the grocer across the street, offered quiet apologies. "We should have stopped her," he said, head low. Their regret didn't help. Karen had stolen Ellie's stories, and I had to face her despair. When Ellie's class van pulled up, I braced myself. She stepped out, her cane tapping, her chestnut hair swaying, then stopped, sensing the air. "Books," she signed on my hand, her fingers trembling. I knelt, signing back. "Gone, Ellie." Karen burned them. Her face crumpled, her hands flapping, a silent wail shaking her body. She dropped to her knees, fingers digging into the ash, searching for her stories. I pulled her close, her grief soaking into me, my own eyes burning. Mrs. Kim wept, and neighbors lowered their phones, some turning away. I held Ellie until her sobs slowed, her small body trembling. "I'm so sorry, love," I whispered, signing. "It too. I'll fix this." I guided her inside, her cane dragging, and tucked her into bed, her eyes hollow. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the ashes a dark stain through the window. Karen thought she'd won, but she didn't know who I was. As a state librarian investigator, I enforce laws protecting library materials. And Karen's burning was a felony under state arson and property laws, carrying fines and prison time. She'd also trespassed and endangered Ellie's education. I was going to bind her in the law. The next morning, I built my case with precision. I pulled Ellie's school records, including her teacher's letter, proving the Braille book's critical role in her literacy. I reviewed state library codes. The books were protected educational property, their destruction illegal. I photographed the ashes, the fire pit, the charred remains with Karen's lighter nearby. I called my state office, who confirmed the arson's legal weight, launching an investigation. I filed a felony property destruction complaint, citing Karen's intent to harm Ellie's education, backed by the teacher's statement. I contacted the police, who logged the trespassing. Every piece of evidence was a chapter in the case against Karen. I went further. Gathering neighbor testimonies, Mrs. Kim wrote a detailed account of Karen's hostility fines for Ellie's books, threats to report her narrations. Mr. Patel described her bullying the neighborhood, how she'd fined him for a cluttered porch, I collected a dozen statements painting Karen as a tyrant. The evidence was a tome, a legal narrative. A week later, the HOA held an emergency meeting in the community center, a packed room with thick tension. Karen sat at the front, her clipboard poised, her smirk defiant, as if she were invincible. Mrs. Kim clutched a photo of Ellie reading, her eyes fierce. I walked in, not as Claire the quiet mom, but as Claire Donovan, State Librarian Investigator. My badge clipped to my belt, a thick folder of evidence in hand. Karen opened the meeting, her voice syrupy with false concern. Let's address the Maplewood book issue. Those Braille books were a violation, and I removed them for the HOA's benefit. I stood, my voice cutting through the room. You burned my daughter's Braille books, Karen. Ellie's blind. Those books were her education, and you destroyed them. The room went silent. Karen's smirk faltered, but she held her ground. They were clutter, Claire. Don't exaggerate. It's a felony, I said, stepping forward, handing the board my folder. You committed arson and property destruction under state law, a felony carrying up to 7 years. You trespassed, broke HOA rules, and endangered a disabled child's education. I filed charges with the state. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I plugged a USB into the projector and played a neighbor's video. Karen lighting the fire, burning the books. Her smirk clear. Mrs. Kim sobbed, holding up Ellie's photo. A woman shouted, "She's a criminal." Karen leaped up, red-faced. This is a setup. You're framing me. It's justice, I said, my badge glinting. I'm a state librarian investigator. You hurt my daughter, and you're done. The room erupted. Neighbors chanted, "Step down." Mrs. Kim waved Ellie's photo, her voice cracking. You hurt that girl. The board 3 nervous figures whispered frantically. The chairman, Ms. Nguyen, stood, voice shaky. I'll vote to remove Karen. Cheers drowned her protests, her face crumpling as her power faded. Karen sank, her clipboard useless, her smirk gone. I didn't gloat. I packed my folder, nodded at Mrs. Kim, and left. The real fight was in court, and I was ready. The law hit Karen like a blaze. The state charged her with felony arson and property destruction, carrying a $15,000 fine and up to 7 years in prison. Trespassing and HOA violations added $2,000 in penalties. In court, I testified in my investigator's uniform, badge shining, voice steady but heavy with Ellie's pain. I detailed the book's role, Karen's deliberate burning, and the trauma inflicted. Ellie's teacher spoke, her words cutting. Those books were her literacy lifeline. Their loss devastated her. The video played, Karen's smirk, a damning. Flame, Mrs. Kim testified, her voice trembling, recounting Ellie's despair by the ashes. The judge was unyielding. You destroyed a blind child's education, he said, his gavel poised. Karen got 4 years in prison, 5 years probation, and a $20,000 fine to replace the books and fund Ellie's Braille lessons. Her lawyer floundered, and she left. In cuffs, head bowed. Karen's house went up for sale. Her reign over Maplewood Terrace ended. Neighbors rallied. Mrs. Kim organized a fundraiser, collecting enough for new Braille books, Harry Potter, Charlotte's Web, and more. Mr. Patel delivered them, and Mia and other kids learned basic signs to share stories with Ellie, her smile returning. The delivery day was a celebration. Neighbors brought cookies. Music played, and Ellie traced her new pages. Ellie didn't read right away. The trauma lingered, her trust shaken. But one evening, I sat her by the window, and she touched the secret garden, her fingers moving. Mine, she signed, her voice soft. I hugged her, my heart full. Yes, Ellie, they're yours. Weeks later, as spring bloomed, Ellie read daily, her narrations filling the house. Mrs. Kim brought new titles. Kids listened nearby, and the neighborhood felt alive. The book stacked high, a symbol of resilience. Maplewood Terrace wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Karen was gone, and Ellie's world glowed again.